Blue Moon is a comedy taking place in 1943. It follows the famous lyricist Lorenz Hart, or Larry for short, played by Ethan Hawke. He's half the famous duo known as Rodgers and Hart, but famous composer Richard Rodgers, played by Andrew Scott, has found a new partner, and on the opening night of their smash hit musical Oklahoma, Larry is left feeling jealous that Rodgers' greatest achievement came without him. So he heads to the bar where the after party is being held, one that Larry too frequently drinks at, and he rambles on about his muses, including the young lady he's currently obsessing over. So this movie is a pseudo-biopic. It's not a career overview, and it's not a womb-to-tomb biopic. It's actually just about one night of Lorenz Hart's life. It's pretty much all at one location and plays in real time. There's a couple core subjects, the first being adoration. Larry is deeply passionate about the things he loves, including writing, music, theater, and of course his current flame. He doesn't just simply like these things, he full-on nerds out about them. Being a very dialogue-driven movie, the lens is much more on the adorer than it is the adored. Even Elizabeth, played by Margaret Qualley, doesn't really get that much screen time until the third act. But it's not all about what Larry adores. He's equally driven by his need to be adored himself, and he expresses this by talking a lot. Like, a lot. He loves being the center of attention, and he commands that through his very boisterous behavior at the bar, connecting with others over the things they love. And naturally, you can make out that his greatest fear is feeling inferior or forgotten. One of the things that sets the stage for this is the intertitle text. He's described by two different quotes that each seem to tell a different story about him. While this might seem a little bit on the nose by telling rather than showing, it actually really worked here. It plants the seed that gets you to realize that there is something dark underneath all of that charm, and when you get glimpses of that, it can actually be kind of sad. That and how inconsistent and kind of two-faced he can be. When you're really paying attention to the things that he's telling people, you start to realize that the things he's saying don't really line up. That's definitely not bad writing though, it's clearly deliberate. He's being a people pleaser because he just needs to feel liked and as if he matters. This might sound like the movie is painting him in a bad light, but it actually humanizes him. His charisma kind of makes his flaws feel charming and endearing, as it often does for screen characters. There's something to be said about rallying behind flawed but charming characters because we see those flaws in ourselves, and that brings us comfort. Maybe because it gives us hope, maybe because it makes iconic characters more relatable. Through all of these traits, it's clear that he's a very envious person, and that's where the film finds its tension, with Larry trying to reconcile with the fact that his long-term collaborator might be better off without him. Of course, the remedy to feeling inferior is feeling admired, and that brings us to the other big subject, which is camaraderie. The movie is also a love letter to the social dynamics you find at the places you unwind at. A lot of you will recognize the bar as a common place for this, even if you don't drink. It's one of the most common places people loosen up and connect with strangers at, if not the most common place. The dialogue is such a huge player here. It's often very bubbly and clever. The conversations they're having are often very thought-provoking and sometimes pretty hilarious. Larry's incredibly witty and has a great sense of humor, and that's where the bulk of the comedy comes from. It is a period film, so he is a little bit bigoted, but that was just the times. It makes perfect sense for him to not meet today's standards for what's appropriate to say, and there's definitely not a copious amount of hate speech. It was really only a few times. While the wittier, sillier dialogue doesn't really always match up with the times, that kind of makes it more palatable. The type of comedy that graced the screens in the 1940s might not always be entertaining now, so this kind of feels like more of a plus than a flaw. So the cast was just terrific. Ethan Hawke absolutely gave one of the best performances of the year here. His enthusiasm is just magnetic. Larry is very dorky and somewhat clueless of how others see him, but his charisma and fastball humor are what make him so charming. He loves to ramble and be silly, but underneath that masking is heartache. We'll occasionally see that there's pain in his heart, but in social settings, he pushes that down. And it's really only through Ethan Hawke's marvelous performance that we can witness that in proper doses. He didn't just turn up the flair, he fully brought this character to life. This is instantly my favorite performance of the year. I really hope he gets the recognition he deserves. It feels like a stretch considering that the movie hasn't been generating a ton of buzz, but I've got my fingers crossed because he is just dynamite. Margaret Qualley is the other standout. Again, she doesn't really get her day in the sun until the third act, but when she does, she fully takes the spotlight with her natural enthusiasm. Given the nature of the dynamics, there's a bit more to her character than just enthusiasm this time though, and the subtlety of her grace makes her so lovable. While I didn't really like her last movie, Honey Don't, I'd mentioned in my review for that movie that she was easily the best thing about it, and she brings that same charm to this movie, as she often does. She's just delightful, and she's really solidifying herself as one of the current A-list actresses. I will probably watch every movie she does from here on out, and I would encourage you to do the same. Bobby Cannavale plays the bartender Eddie, who was actually one of the bigger characters. Him and Larry seem to know each other quite well, and they have a great dynamic. They're definitely friends, but you can sense that he kind of loathes some of Larry's qualities, as Eddie has a much simpler way of seeing the world by comparison. The two of them share conversations that are both interesting and hilarious. And then Andrew Scott plays the famous composer Richard Rodgers, and he's solid. Andrew Scott is just incredibly talented. He definitely does not disappoint here, but he also doesn't really have a whole lot to play with in this movie. His character is a straight shooter, so his performance is pretty subtle. Still good, but I wouldn't call him a standout here. The only two criticisms are pretty small, the first being the dynamic between Richard Rodgers and Lorenz Hart, mainly on the Richard side. The movie kept jumping back and forth between him finding Larry insufferable and him establishing Larry as a friend, literally within seconds. Like, there's this scene where they're talking in a staircase, and it's kind of jarring how much this happens. It kind of felt like they mixed a bunch of takes each with different directions, so it's not explicitly clear how Richard feels about Larry. And while the dialogue is what makes this movie so great, it kind of feels like there could have been another break or two. Like, the whole first hour is just fast-paced dialogue back and forth. And then Larry took a bathroom break, and it literally just felt like a quiet break for us. I literally took a breath and thought, okay, good. Just a short break, and then you can fire back with all the fast chatter. So I gotta say, I loved this movie. The flaws really paled in comparison to what made the movie great. And I will also add that if you're like me and you love the movie Casablanca, you will really enjoy the little references they make to it. This movie takes place the year after that one came out, so it makes sense. If you have not seen Casablanca, what are you doing? It's literally one of the greatest movies ever made. So overall, I'd say there's just enough to call this movie incredible. Ethan Hawke makes this character so magnetic, and the dialogue is utterly addictive. If you like dialogue-driven movies and memorable characters, I can't recommend this movie enough. There's just so much to munch on. Thank you for watching this review. If it brought you any value at all, please give it a like. It really helps this channel grow. I will see you later this week with a review of Springsteen.